let me add one thing. Through all that fame and money, was kind of allotted him to be very active in politics and getting bills passed and in the LGBTQ community. He's just he's used his money for the right thing. So has the rest of the band, and I think that's admirable to do with your money and your influence. So
Yeah,
That's a great pick.
very
Great
good.
pick. I just
Yeah.
learned so much about REM.
that's kind of how I went into it. I was like, I might be a little long-winded, and I apologize about that.
Oh, that was great.
Wow,
That was
Not
awesome.
at all.
Oh,
that was great.
You're our
Well,
guest.
listen-
That's why we brought you here.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. All right, who's next? Who's next? Who
Well,
wants
what
that?
I want to say though, real
Oh, yeah.
quick before we move on, just because I was pretty sure you were gonna pick REM, and when I was thinking about what bands I would pick, they probably would have been my choice if I knew
If they wouldn't
I
have
didn't
given
know
all
they were
that
gonna-
money to the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, that ruined it for me.
Oh my God, that was good.
Couldn't handle
Their
Um,
consistency is what keeps me from naming them as having the best catalog. I just think it's when they were introduced to me and their catalog, you know what I mean? It's just
Well, one of the big things for me that I was going to say is that they bridge this gap between the 80s and 90s that I don't think any other band does.
Yeah.
And not just American, but any other band.
no, you're
Like,
right. You're right.
You think about the world of the early 80s in music and then
Yeah.
the world of like the mid 90s, and they were equally relevant in both of those times, which is a pretty crazy thing. It had
Yeah.
changed a lot, and I feel like they bridge this gap also between sort of like indie rock of the late 90s and maybe even early 2000s, and also like indie rock of the 80s. I mean, they were an indie rock band in the 80s, but I think something about what they did influenced a whole generation of indie rock, like well after they were
And more
a popular band or even
Yes.
done being a band,
Yes.
which is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, I have to agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, if you think about when they came out, if you weren't on a major label, I mean, no one heard your music, spawned the term college radio.
Yeah.
So you'd have these college radio stations that weren't like told and paid to play certain music. So they were playing all the underground stuff. So there wasn't even the term indie rock
Yeah.
because there was nothing to be independent from
Right.
but a major label. So everybody was indie. So I feel like when they dropped the college radio moniker, they ran with alternative rock and
Right.
then on to maybe indie rock now. So
Yeah, I don't know if anybody ever
that's
would
why I
have
say
called
they
it
they
that.
birthed a genre. It's a genre. It
Yeah.
really is. It's this that
Yeah, and I think even made this blueprint that bands followed of like start out on an indie label,
yes.
establish yourself for a few albums, and then maybe move on to the major label and some bigger success. And like that's worked with varying success for different bands, but it
Yep.
became a model to follow.
Did. Yep.
I think
Great
in a
point.
lot of ways because of them.
Yep. Great point. Yep. Absolutely, man.
So-
No, I'm glad y'all dug that. Cool.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
I just wanted to add that in, and
I
now
love that. That was a great
Yeah.
adage.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well
All
said.
right. Guess I'm next. My band, what I used for criteria was, were they unconventional when they came out? Were they like experimental territory for rock in general? Were they successful, both in the U.S. and worldwide? Were they inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Things of that nature was a lot. I was originally going to pick Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, but then I thought about being in a band and what it takes to, when you're writing songs as a band, almost like I felt like the band that I picked had to be together, writing the songs together, and less of a singer-songwriter type of direction, like Petty or E Street Band. So my band is The Doors. I feel that coming out. I was looking at the history of music from the time and the bands that influenced the Doors, which was a lot of it. Doors had a lot of influence from Frank Sinatra and Elvis. Well, at least Jim Morrison did. But I watched the Doors documentary yesterday. I went through all of their catalog. It's just incredible what they were able to accomplish in just 4.5 years.
Yeah, agreed.
4.5 years?
Yeah, that's all they were together.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It's
Yeah.
great pick, Joe. Some of my favorite songs ever written.
Just overall vibe. Like,
yep.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. Like,
no one has ever or ever will sound like the Doors.
No.
Like, ever.
And they were hated by critics. They were, I think, the first band to do anything punk in general, get in trouble for it. Definitely a lot of bad things happened on tour with them. And I just kind of wanted to break down each member. If it's a little loud, let me know. I'll go inside. But Robbie Krieger, he's still alive. He played guitar. He had a very odd style of playing. His influences were classical music, Frank Sinatra, Fats Dominoes, The Platters. He was listed as by Rolling Stone top 100 greatest guitarists of all times. He was one of the main writers on Light My Fire, and he co-wrote the song People Are Strange with Jim Morrison. Then you have Raymond Manzarek Jr., who passed away in 2013. He played keyboard bass and sang. So they didn't have a bassist. I think they did in the studio, but he would play the bass at the same time. So he was playing two instruments at the same time during their live shows. Another powerhouse member. He's a singer, producer, film director, and author. He was listed by USA Today as one of the best keyboardists of all time. He kind of brings that circus element, like Mr. Kite of the Beatles, like to the Doors, which is you need that for them to, for a huge aspect of what makes them stand out. And then you have John Densmore. He's still alive. He's 76, the drummer. He was influenced by jazz, world music, just rock and roll. He was influenced by Elvin Jones, which was John Coltrane's drummer. He's also a filmmaker and author. So every member, you can tell they're just doing, multifaceted, doing other things involved in art besides music, which is really awesome. And then, Jim Morrison, his influences were literature, poetry, religion, philosophy, psychology, Kerouac, Joseph Campbell, shamans, Elvis, Frank Sinatra. He considered his style baritone and a crooning vocal style. He's one of the most iconic and influential frontmen in rock history.
Yes.
He was the main writer of Soul Kitchen. He co-wrote People Are Strange with Robbie, and then he drunkenly wrote Roadhouse Blues. And I also want to include their producer, Paul Rothchild. He passed away in 1995. He also studied classical music, conducting. His mother was an opera singer, recorded on analog tape. He produced Janis Joplin, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So I wanted to include the producer because he's a part of so many of their albums, a majority of them. And as a whole, the band wrote some of their biggest songs together in one room. Riders on the Storm, Break On Through, and 20th Century Fox being just a few of them. The band started technically in 1961 under the title Rick and the Ravens. Ray, John, and Jim were members of that band, and then they changed their name in 1967 to The Doors, named after Aldous Huxley's psychedelic memoirs of the Doors of Perception. And the lyric that the name of the band comes from is, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. I just love how many layers there are to this band. There's so much mythos around this band and so many details that are pretty amazing. They started as a house band. They became a house band early on at a bar called Whiskey A Go-Go in West Hollywood. And then when they got to a part of a song where he did a spoken word, improv part, Jim Morrison was so fucked up on acid that he started yelling. He started saying, "Father, I want to kill you. Mother, I want to fuck you." and that did not go over well with the bar owner, obviously, and they got fired. And that was not the end of them, which probably could have been the end of a lot of bands. They got assigned to Elektra Records in 1966. They were the first band to pay to be on a billboard.
Wow.
Got on the radio and got pretty big pretty fast from getting radio play. They put out 6 studio albums with Jim Morrison. Couple fun facts. Jim Morrison, as a nervous child, if he wet the bed, his mom would make him sleep in his wet sheets as punishment. Things like that, and going off on stage and saying the things that he said. I feel like his family life was what that band needed for him to exist in general. He had to go through what seemed to be the worst family life as a kid to be the powerhouse that he became. Their albums ranked best to worst online after going through a bunch of different websites. Self-titled being number 1, very bluesy and mystical sounding record, also produced by Rothschild. LA Woman, 1971, is considered one of the most raw records, which is more straight up blues. And then Strange Days came out in 1967. That was more of like a psychedelic rock album. And then you have Morrison Hotel, which was considered, and that was in 1970, which was raunchy and dirty. Second half of the album seemed to be stronger than the first, in my opinion. And they have Waiting on the Sun, 1968.
My favorite song on the Shrek soundtrack.
And then Soft Parade, which a lot
favorites.
of people thought wasn't really heavy enough, and it was more pop songs with a lot of horns. They did 3 albums after Jim passed away. I strongly believe he passed away from snorting heroin. I know that there was a lot of mystery behind his death, but there were a few witness accounts, witnesses of where he was and what he was asking for at a certain club. And from watching the documentary, I really don't like his girlfriend Pam. I feel like him and her, part of the reason why he I don't know why he was doing such heavy drugs. I think he was just too into drugs in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's incredibly talented. But yeah, most unconventional band of the 1960s. Jim Morrison could have been a standalone poet on his own, hated by critics. Definitely helped move rock into a more experimental territory like Jimi Hendrix and Pink Floyd. Sold 30 million albums in the US. They got kicked off the Ed Sullivan Show for not changing the lyrics because they thought it was too druggy. They were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993. They won a Grammy for Lifetime Achievement Award in 2007. 5 gold albums in a row, which I believe has only been achieved by The Doors. Over 100 million albums sold worldwide. Most of a tour got canceled because of Jim Morrison was found guilty of profanity and indecent exposure. He almost went to jail for 4 months. And yeah, they influenced Iggy Pop, Joy Division, Stone Temple Pilots, and the Strokes. And yeah, that's everything I have.
That's amazing.
Doors.
That's awesome. I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know that the Doors sang Strange Days. I thought that was the Beatles, and I just Googled it. And
No, that's an album. Strange Days was the album.
The song you're thinking of is People Are Strange.
Oh, who sang the song? Nobody told me there'd be days like this. Who sang that song? Strange
That's
Days.
John Lennon, I think.
Okay.
After
John
he
Lennon.
did this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
solo John Lennon.
okay. Yeah, that's a great pick, man. It's hard not to pick the Doors as the best American band of all time.
They're
It's
great.
really hard not to pick them.
I had many days sitting in the car, hanging out with my friends in high school, listening to When the Music's Over and The End. And like, those are some of my favorite songs. My favorite song off the self-titled is The Crystal Ship.
Yep, great song.
It's just like whimsical and dreamy. And I think that's where they shine the most, is when they were like a little slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, The End is amazing. All 46 minutes of it.
So can I ask you guys? So Joe and Seamus, I guess you guys are both Doors fans. Would you consider yourself?
I would consider myself a Doors fan. I mean, you know,
celebrate their entire catalog.
I do own all their music. Yeah.
so like I've always respected them and liked them, but to me, like they've been a little more of like a greatest hits type of band. I actually don't think I've ever listened to an entire Doors album start to finish. Would you say that like they are that type of band where you sit with each album, go through their catalog, go through albums, and like it all holds up, or is it more selective, like songs here and there throughout the catalog?
I'll let Joe answer that. But I have an opinion, but Joe should.
I think certain records are like that, where it's more of a, like I might skip a song or two, but for the earlier records, no, I listened to them front to back and I really enjoyed it a lot. I just like the journey that I went on. But for the songs that are the hit songs, I'm just so happy that those songs exist on a level that surpasses a lot of bands that came from the United States for me. So, yeah.
How many bands had an Oliver Stone directed movie about them? That's kind of crazy.
That's the only band that I know that's had an Oliver Stone movie.
Yeah.
I know there was one president as well.
One band and one president.
One president. That was it. He just moves on after. But no, that's an amazing pick. The Doors are epic and should definitely be brought up in like the conversation of greatest American band, especially in the short run they had. I feel like Jim lived a lot of life before 27, like, you know.
Yeah.
That's crazy. When you said
4.5 years.
I had no idea that their run was so short. I thought it was.
He was so young. Think about that too. Like he was just like barely old enough, you know, in modern times, I guess, to drink, and like he was thrown into stardom and, you know, dealt with it with large amounts of alcohol and drugs, but you know, they were huge. They were really huge.
One thing I always think about is crazy is that period from the early 60s to basically the end of the 60s, that like most bands were expected for a lot of that time to put out an album a year, or for the early half of the 60s, 2 albums a year.
Yeah.
And so the ones that we remember as the greatest, you know, like even you think about the Beatles, I mean, you're generally talking about 8 years or something of putting out records, you know, and like, so they would, I feel like, put out this tremendous amount of music in a short amount of time.
Yep.
And that's really something. I think like after that, what was normal and expected in the record industry started to change, and bands were given some more time to put out an album, and then you tour for a year and then you go back. And that during that time, it's really amazing when you think about the amount of music that a lot of bands put out in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. But back to what you said, I think it is a greatest hits band. I mean, you could line up like their 15 greatest songs and that'd be a great album to have, you know, in of itself. But I'd start with the self-titled and just listen to that front to back. And then if you like that enough, move on to Soft Parade or LA Woman for sure.
Okay.
They're in my probably like top 10 bands, I'd say. Top 10, 15 of all time.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, I guess I'm up.
John, bring it home.
Bring us home.
Bring us
USA,
home, brother.
USA.
USA.
I am a real American. John,
please go ahead, man. We want to know more about Bon Jovi. Come on.
Yeah, my pick is John Bon Jovi.
As greatest American.
Particularly his cover of the Pogues Fairy Tale in New York that he recently released.
Did he really do that?
Yeah, he did. Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Hold on.
No, so I just, like I said, I feel like there's a lot of ways that this could go. I thinking about it, like I was really realizing how much of what I think of as like classic rock, or like the most influential rock, has really come out of England, I think, or maybe, you know, even to some extent Ireland. And I was saying this to somebody the other day. I don't know if I said, I think I said it on the podcast last week, but for a minute when I was thinking of like the greatest bands of in recent history, is like American, oh yeah, U2, they're a great American band. Like I had a lot of stupid moments like that where I thought about a band from the UK. But so, like, I think America doesn't have as many definitive.
My initial pick was Sugar Ray. Sugar Ray.
Sigur Rós.
Is that a combination of Sugar Ray and Sigur Rós?
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Greg has been shaking his head at all of my jokes in your podcast.
I heard the Edge was from Wichita. No, I'm just kidding.
But I feel like America doesn't have. It's all over the place. There's tons of amazing bands, but there's not as much definitive stuff in America, and so it was really hard to pick. And ultimately, I decided to kind of take out personal preference and look for what I thought is really like the most influential and the most American in a certain way. And so in that, I landed on the Beach Boys.
Yes.
That's a great
and
pick.
really that was it. Because I feel like their sound is uniquely American.
Yeah.
I don't think that music could have come from any other place, and specifically California too,
Right.
like,
I agree.
So that was a big factor. And and I do like the Beach Boys a lot. And, I feel like everybody loves Pet Sounds and agrees that it's one of the great
Greatest
albums of all time.
Yep, definitely. One of the great.
I would be there too, but it's not like I'm sitting down and listening to Beach Boys records almost ever, really, other than that one. But I am familiar with their catalog, and but I think they're the closest thing I think America has to the Beatles when it comes down to it. Like
A good
a
comparison.
band that legitimately changed rock music and brought it from one place to another as a genre, and also really opened up a whole new world of what you could do as a band. So like I think they were right there with the Beatles and doing that, especially with what they were doing in the studio. That around the time of Pet Sounds, they were doing something similar to the Beatles, which is using the studio and multi-tracking as a part of their songwriting, as a part of their art, really, in a way that it hadn't been done before.
Yep.
So that was a big factor. I don't think there's really anyone else quite on that level in America. And I think that also that idea of them, they kind of start out as that simple pop group singing about cars and surfing. And I'm pretty sure none of them ever surfed. I might have to double check that, but I have read that none of them ever went surfing in their entire life.
That's crazy.
So in that sense, they were a bunch of liars.
But they like the beach. They like
did.
Look on the
Like-
troubled
They
rise.
don't
like-
get enough of it.
Yeah. They were the Beach Boys.
us. We're right here. We're the Beach Boys.
The original Beach Patrol.
We are. When you think of the beach, we're the boys.
Yeah. They would probably watched a lot of people surf
Right.
from the beach.
Yeah.
They're
amazing.
But yeah, so that's all that stuff went into my pick. And another thing that, as I was looking into them a little bit more, a factor I hadn't really thought about is like their influence that extending like way beyond their genre and way beyond. I mean, I guess technically they're still a band, but I feel like I don't know. I don't think of them as an active band really anymore. But I was reading something that it really struck me is that like their influence even on like punk rock, because you had like the Ramones come along and take a certain element of their sound and apply it to punk rock music.
Yeah, they did.
And you can really, it's pretty direct when you listen to the Ramones.
You can hear it.
Yeah, it's not even that subtle. But then you have all these bands influenced by the Ramones, and then pop punk especially. Like there's this sort of template that's set by the Beach Boys way back in the 60s that is still being used by pop punk bands, you know, throughout, or I mean, up until today, you know, for better or worse. But
Right.
I mean, but that's an amazing thing. Like, and they've also had a tremendous influence in indie rock as well. I think there's like many indie rock bands that would cite them
Totally.
as an influence on their sound. And you know, when you think about an American band starting out in the early 60s in California, you know, singing about cars and girls and surfing and the beach, and then somehow elevating to the level of actual art that's changing the genre, and then in turn influencing people for another 40 or 50 years. It's really amazing. And yeah, so I don't think there's anything else in American music that can quite compare to that. So
Bravo.
I get
Yeah,
I've
that's
never
a
heard anybody
great-
refer to the Beach Boys as the American Beatles, but that rings so true.
Especially when you look at their style, like he said, he referenced how their early work was more lighthearted and fun, just like the Beatles was like hold your hand.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they were talking about Surfing Safari and My Surfer Girl, and then they did over the years they grew musically and
Well, then lyrically as well, their themes started getting a lot
God,
more complex and deep.
I
you know.
absolutely love Beach Boys. Are one of those bands that I heard when I was younger. I heard the early stuff and I still thought that was cool, even though it wasn't parallel with what I was listening to, but I loved it so much. And then you go all the way to Pet Sounds and stuff, and I've owned so many copies of that record over the years. But wow, they're amazing.
And then you have the poor man's Beach Boys, the Monkees.
Right, you did.
How did they not make
What I like about one more thing I like about the Beach Boys is they could take like a poppy, almost like blatantly poppy theme and make it, and the notes and the words and the music is genius. So like when I grow up to be a man, you know, you'd hear that the first time and go, it's weird, but like when you really hear how beautiful that song is, it's mind blowing. And I could say that
I didn't know that was a Beach Boys song, and I thought you were just about to have a catharsis on this podcast.
See,
I thought
Mike,
you were going to explain to us.
That's why there's a secret plan to replace you with me.
I don't think it's secret.
I'm just kidding. That's not going to happen. But I think that's an amazing pick, John. Like for real, Beach Boys are such an American, like you said, they are such an American icon.
Yeah. I kind of went back and forth because there are bands that I am more connected to and more
Right,
of
of course,
fan of that I could have chosen for this.
Yep.
If you're going to nail it down, I think the answer to this question is the Beach Boys or maybe the Doors.
Yeah, like from a technical standpoint.
Exactly.
I went back and forth between the Beach Boys and the Doors, and what made me pick the Doors was just listening to a Beach Boys song and then listening to a Doors song and just saying, which one do I like better? So I had to break from the Beach Boys personally to get to the Doors.
I thought about that a little bit too. Like on paper, all of our answers might be slightly different if it was just on paper and you took taste completely out of it.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
You know, so it's cool, man.
I was like, what band do I want to write about and talk about for all this time? Beach Boys or the Doors. So that's part
I don't think you could legitimately argue any of our answers. No. So like,
yeah, I think they would legitimately be on most lists of like top 10 American bands. I think.
But I love how all of our answers came from a different angle. Every one of our answers were from a completely different angle. Yep. I think that's what's so interesting about this show. So
I like that we didn't. Oh, sorry, Greg. What did you say?
I was saying I like how I think all of us had Beach Boys in the chamber.
Yeah, I did too. I looked at Aerosmith's longevity. You know, you have like the Eagles have the most selling album out of everybody, and you have all this criteria that you can like sift through.
Yeah.
And then, you know,
But
whatever
I feel
dumps
like,
out.
like Aerosmith, for example, I feel like their late 90s, early 2000 years really took them out of the running.
Yeah,
Yep.
because it was bullshit. Because it was bullshit.
Yes,
Is that why?
Most of it was, but then you know, like, dude looks like a lady wasn't exactly like
it might not hold up today. I don't know.
coolest hook, you know, like. But yeah, they're a great band too, but they didn't stack up enough. So yeah.
Anyone else have any close bands that came close that were in the running? For me, it was Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Beach Boys. I thought about the Ramones but I didn't dive into, you know, too much into them, like information and history and stuff. And then Beach Boys, of course.
Even though I'm not a personal fan of theirs, I would probably put Foo Fighters up there.
Yeah, they're up there for sure.
Me and John have had a couple conversations about this.
But Greg, wait, is it Greg? You are just not a fan of.
No, it's me too.
I just don't like Dave Grohl.
Okay, Greg doesn't like Dave Grohl, and Seamus, you just don't like the Foo Fighters.
No.
I hate the Foo Fighters.
Wow.
Look, the Foo Fighters have written some great songs, but there's something about the way they presented themselves. It was almost like the hard rock Blink-182 shtick, like where Blink did the naked thing and the spiked hair, and like they went through that, but their music was great, but they had that shtick, right?
Yeah.
I feel that way about Foo Fighters, is like all these acting videos where they're like the pilot and like
a Learn to Fly video.
Yeah, like that kind of crushed it for me. And then I always felt like, I don't know,
just cheesy visuals.
I thought it was cool. The one thing I think it was cool about Foo Fighters is that Dave brought Pat Smear, who did a lot of work with Nirvana guitar wise. He brought them along with Foo Fighters, which I respect a lot. Instead of like leaving him out to dry, he like paid him, you know what I mean? Like, that's cool. And I watched that documentary where Dave gets that old Neve board and moves it to his studio. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah, is it about that studio out in California?
I watched that, and I think Dave's a great guy. I think he's cool, man, but I just don't like the marketing behind the band. I think the name,
I think that hits the nail on the head for me. Yeah,
there you go.
The way they presented themselves and the way they got big, and I'm sure Dave Grohl's a really nice guy. I just don't want to hang out with him.
From all accounts, I know like a few people who've met him or like played shows with him or toured with him, and like legitimately like good, nice guy. Like,
I believe that. No, I believe that he's like, for his wealth and influence.
Yeah, like he's much nicer than he has to be for like.
I've heard that.
But I would also say the first 3, maybe 4 Foo Fighters albums are legitimately all really great. After that, I don't know if I could vouch for much, but
I'll have to go back.
I'd say first 3.
I think every single Foo Fighter song is a 5 out of 10. Every single one.
Wow.
Not exaggerating.
Damn.
We might have to do a whole episode about the Foo Fighters now.
Yeah.
I would love to unpack this. This is kind of fascinating.
Dave, and not to my opinion, but Dave sometimes might have put off this air that like he had a hall pass because of Nirvana.
Exactly.
And
Let me ask you guys this, though.
He sort of like put a band together and said, "Hey, I'm the guy from Nirvana," while Chris Novoselic went and like stayed underground and got into politics and did other shit with his money.
Right.
Dave was like, "Look, I'm the drummer for Nirvana, and I like guitar too." Like, that's how it comes off to me.
But if he didn't have the songs to back it up, it wouldn't have gone anywhere.
You're right. No, you're right.
He doesn't.
I have to listen. I
Let
have
me
to
Everyone
let
is
me
a
guys-
5 out of 10.
Let
I
me
have
guys
to
ask-
listen to them. I can't watch them. I can't watch them live. I can't watch a video. But if I listen to them, I actually enjoy a lot of their music. I really do.
Okay. Let me ask you guys a question.
All right.
Let me you ask a question. Did
This
you
is like an episode of Twin Peaks.
were you aware of the first Foo Fighters album? When
Yes, 100%.
You were.
100%.
It
I
was
talk
not-
about it. I put it on, carry it on.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
100%.
it was not that big.
That was a really
though.
good song. That was a great
Yeah,
song.
it's a great song. But that first album, it wasn't automatically right out of the gate huge. Like that, they had a couple of good radio songs from that, and I feel like they didn't really blow up till the second album. So I mean, like it didn't seem to me like an automatic given of they're just gonna be huge because of Nirvana, and like
Slow to work for it.
it seemed like they worked their way towards it. I mean, they had a
real
big,
good.
what's that?
He did take that hall pass though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, look,
I'm
they
still
had a
glad-
big leg up being being from, if you come out of the biggest rock band in the world and start a new band, you're gonna have an advantage.
Yeah.
But
I don't
I
agree. I'm so happy you asked that question because I thought the first Foo Fighters album was awesome, and I thought everyone after that was bullshit. I thought that's when they kind of took that hall pass.
I would say the color and the shape is better than the first album.
Oh gosh, 5 out of 10. It's all 5 out of 10.
That's 5
good.
out of 10.
The color and the shape was there.
Go
The color
for
and the
it.
shape.
5.
That was their we're working from home during coronavirus. I could do some work, but I'm probably just gonna play PlayStation all day.
Oh my
That was that album.
God.
Not that I do that. I know people that do that. I don't do that.
Yeah.
We might have to wrap this up, but I could talk about this all day. I would challenge any of you to go back and listen to the color and the shape with an open mind and tell
I'm
me
gonna
what
do
you
that,
thought.
John. No, I'm serious. I'm gonna do that. Maybe
Where am I supposed to get an open mind from?
I'm
That's
gonna
a
do
pretty
that,
Big ask.
I
John.
know.
Real quick. I'm not in everything I just said. I never slammed their
Game
music.
is coming to us live from the Blair Witch Project.
You just stole my joke, motherfucker. I was waiting for the right time.
I just want to say I'm sorry to John's mom and to Andy's mom.
Babe, yeah,
so
I never
scared
said
right
anything bad
now.
about the music. It
I
was
threw the
always
fucking
like
map in the
their,
river.
it was their overall shine and their everything else. So not to knock, I'm gonna go listen to that band. I'm gonna go listen to that album that John recommended.
And report back.
Yeah, make sure we know you're still alive. Whatever you do, don't put your face in the corner.
Yeah. Just-
I'm breaking up.
We're losing him.
The witch got him.
all right. Well, we're almost hitting the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, this is a perfect ending for this 2-hour long show.
Seamus
Is this a
didn't make it.
two-part? It might have to be a two-parter. We'll see.
No.
He didn't make it.
That's
might
getting
have to-
wacky.
We might have to have a to be continued at the end of this one. All right.
Somebody text
Another
Seamus. Make sure you're still alive.
Make sure he's okay. But yeah, we've gone a long time. I think it's time to say goodbye. Whether or not Seamus has made it. Oh, wait.
Oh, there it is. We're saying our goodbyes.
All right, Seamus. Seamus, thank you
My
for
internet's freezing up. If y'all can hear me, thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Great talking with y'all.
Hey, thanks for being here, Seamus.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Great work, everybody.
Stay
Later.
tuned next week as we talk about.
We make sure Seamus is still alive
Yeah.
and see if anyone listened to any Foo Fighters albums.
Nah.
Sure.
we'll
was
have
a-
another. We'll figure something out. We don't need
Yeah.
to talk about it right now.
All right. Everyone have a good week. Don't watch the news.
Yeah. Bye.